Sometimes the moment that changes a woman's life doesn't arrive in a crisis. It arrives quietly. A pause in the morning, a glance in the mirror, a feeling she can't quite explain. And that's exactly where Maggie found herself one morning. She stood in front of the mirror, toothbrush in hand, staring at the same woman who had gotten up every day, done the hard things, kept the schedule, and kept herself small. Maggie didn't recognize herself anymore. Not really. It wasn't that her world had suddenly fallen apart. No. The unraveling had been slow, one broken promise at a time, one more moment she didn't speak up, one more birthday she'd planned for everyone else, the cake, the decorations, the gifts. And when her birthday came, it passed quietly, almost like it didn't matter. And now she stood at the edge, not of a cliff exactly, but of something unfamiliar. The beginning of discovering herself again. Finally. But where would she begin? Maybe you see a little of yourself in Maggie. Maybe your life didn't unravel in one loud moment either. Maybe it happened quietly, one compromise at a time, one moment of putting yourself last. You've been functioning like a pro, but feeling like a ghost in your own life. Years of carrying more than anyone ever realized, until one day you look around and think, how did I get here? You're still functioning, still responsible, still showing up for everyone. And yet, inside, something feels distant. Almost like you've disappeared from your own life. Before we go any further, I invite you to pause with me for a moment. Take a slow breath in and just let it go. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply notice where we are. Notice what stirred inside you while you were listening to Maggie's story. There's nothing you need to fix right now. Just notice. Now let's talk about why moments like Maggie's happen to so many women. Because what she experienced isn't unusual. In fact, it's very common. Especially for women who have spent years in survival mode, holding families together, showing up for work, being dependable, and doing what needed to be done. Over time, a woman can become so focused on keeping life moving forward that she quietly steps out of the center of her own life. Somewhere along the way, her own needs move quietly to the bottom of the list. Not because they don't matter, but because there was always something that felt more urgent. And years can pass that way. Until one day she realizes something feels different. Not dramatic, just unfamiliar. If any of this sounds familiar to you, I want you to hear something. It's completely okay not to know where to start. But it's not okay to believe that you are stuck forever. Because you're not. Something begins to shift for many women at this point. Not loudly and not all at once. often it'll arrive quietly. You might even miss it for a bit. It's almost like a thought that drifts in while the house is still, or when you're driving somewhere alone, or standing at the sink after everyone else has gone to bed. And the thought sounds something like this: there has to be more than this. It's not loud. It's actually a whisper. And the whisper isn't coming from the tired part of you. It isn't coming from the part that doubts or worries. That whisper comes from a deeper place, from the part of you that still remembers who you are, the part that still believes something meaningful is possible. That woman hasn't disappeared. Life just got loud for a long time. And it was almost impossible to listen to her. But she's still there. When that whisper appears, many women immediately think they need a plan, a new life, a big decision, some kind of dramatic change. But the first step is not what you think. It's not overhauling your entire life. And it's not waking up tomorrow with complete clarity about who you are and where you're going. And it's certainly not having everything figured out. In truth, the first step is much smaller than that. It's simply allowing yourself to believe that change might be possible. Even if that belief is very small, even if it shows up as a question, like, what if something better is possible for me? That question alone can begin to wake up so many things inside you. Because the moment you allow yourself to imagine that things could be different, change is already beginning. And that beginning doesn't have to look dramatic. In fact, most of the time it doesn't. Real courage is usually very quiet. It might look like getting out of bed and drinking a glass of water on a day when you would rather disappear. It might look like saying no to something you've always said yes to, simply to keep the peace. It might look like allowing yourself to want something again, even though part of you wonders if you're allowed. These small moments may not look impressive from the outside, but they matter. Because courage doesn't always look bold. Sometimes courage is simply choosing not to abandon yourself. Every time a woman makes a courageous choice that honors herself, even in a small way, something inside her begins to strengthen. That's what I mean when I talk about courageous confidence. The courage comes first. The confidence grows later. One small act of self-trust at a time. When a woman practices small acts of courage, there's a shift happening, a gradual shift. She starts to trust herself again. She begins to notice what she enjoys, what matters to her. She begins to notice what she might want to explore. And little by little, possibility begins to appear. Not as a grand plan, but small openings. A conversation that she's decided to have. A class that she's decided to take because she's curious. A boundary she decides to set. A new interest she allows herself to explore. None of these things look dramatic on their own, but together they begin to change the direction of a woman's life. Because courage does something very powerful. It creates space for something new to exist. And that's really what this journey is all about. Having the courage to create what's possible. Not someday, not when everything is perfect, but here, right here, where you are now, in this moment. Now, imagine what begins to change when a woman practices this kind of courage for a while. Just imagine that she believes that the life she's been living is not the only life available to her. There are choices. There are directions that she hasn't explored. There are parts of herself she hasn't fully expressed yet. And once that sense of possibility begins to appear, even in small ways, there's a shift. She begins paying closer attention to what feels true for her now. What matters now? What no longer fits? What brings her energy and what drains her? Little by little, she begins making choices that reflect those truths. Not perfectly, but intentionally. She can speak a little more honestly. She can set a boundary where she never would have before. She can try something new simply because she's curious. And none of this happens all at once. But over time, these small intentional choices begin to change the direction of her life. And it's not because someone else designed a better life for her, but because she's beginning to create one that reflects who she truly is. And along the way, something beautiful happens. She starts trusting herself again. Not because she has all the answers, but because she's listening closely to what is true for her. You might be listening to this and wondering what that could look like for you. And that's a really good question, because this journey doesn't begin with a dramatic change. It begins with awareness. You've heard me talk about that before, but it all begins with awareness. So I'd like to invite you to pause just for a moment and consider something. Where in your life might courage be quietly asking for your attention? Not the kind of courage that requires a huge leap, just a small, honest step. Whatever it is, whatever comes up for you, pay attention to it. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be yours. Because that's how courageous confidence grows, one small act of self-respect at a time. And this is where many women begin to notice something else. As they start making those small intentional choices, old memories sometimes rise to the surface, moments that still carry some emotional weight. Words that were spoken years ago but still echo in her mind. Experiences that shaped how a woman sees herself and what she believes is possible. And until some of that emotional weight begins to soften, it can be very difficult to move forward with confidence. That's one of the reasons I've created a live class called Make Peace with Your Past. On Tuesday, March 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm hosting a live online session where we explore gentle, practical ways to release the emotional weight that painful experiences can leave behind. In this class, I'll guide you through a process that helps you finally stop replaying the same painful memories of the worst, most poisonous words your partner ever spoke to you, and begin releasing the emotional charge they still carry. We'll talk about the emotional release method, A simple way to begin letting go of the heaviness you may have been carrying for years so that you can breathe easier. You'll also learn what I call the softening technique, a way to help your body relax and remember what real safety and inner calm can feel like. And I'll introduce you to something I call the wisdom glasses, a powerful way of looking back at old relationship stories with new eyes, seeing wisdom where shame once lived, and hope where pain used to echo. I'll also share the insight of one of my clients, Emmy. She discovered something, a quiet, steady confidence returning, the kind that gently whispered to her, "You're safe to begin your love life again." If you feel ready to begin loosening the hold the past may still have on you, I would love for you to join us. And whether you decide to join us for the class or not, I want you to remember something. The moment we talked about earlier in this conversation, the quiet moment when a woman realizes there might be more for her life, it's not small. It's the beginning of something new, because the life you want to create doesn't begin with a perfect plan. It begins with awareness, with curiosity, with one small act of courage that says, "My life matters too." So as you move through the rest of your day, I invite you to notice something gently. Notice the small moments where courage quietly shows up in your life. Notice the moments you speak honestly. Notice the moment you choose something that feels true for you. Notice the moment you allow yourself to imagine what might be possible. Those moments may seem small. They are how a woman begins creating a life that truly belongs to her. And that journey always begins exactly where you are, right here, right now. So take care of your gentle, beautiful heart. And that's enough for today.